So the first question is, what kind of changes do you want to see in Syria?
It's very important, Mohammed, today that there is, the whole region is changing. As you've seen, there has been change in Tunisia. They move towards democracy. In Egypt, the same. Yemen. People want change all over the Middle East. And everybody in the region wants the same. Everybody wants to be free of dictatorship. Everybody wants to live in democracy. They want their human rights, their freedoms, and these are their legitimate rights, and nobody could stop them from having that. So this is what I want to see in my country.
And what would be the best way to bring that change forward?
I think the best way to bring it forward is for the regime to set up a national committee, which is a national reform committee, implementation committee, and this committee will have to have members from the regime at the same time as members of the democratic opposition, and they should sit together and discuss and form, of course, a national unity government, and they should have a clear timetable for that. They should also have discussions and deliver a new constitution for Syria, a constitution that allows a multi-party system, a constitution that guarantees the separation of powers, the independence of the judiciary, and of course that would protect all individuals, groups, minorities, regardless of religions, ethnic group or sex. This is very important.
And what do you think of the current opposition movement?
I think that the current opposition movement is not very credible, because a lot of them, most of them, I mean, the ones, for example, that met in Antalya, there's many opposition groups, of course. You have the Kurdish groups who are, they have their rights and their legitimate rights, and the regime should have listened to them, and we've been calling on the regime to listen to them for years now. You also have, for example, the Damascus declarations, who are, a group of intellectuals, who are the ones based in Damascus, because some of them are, they came later and they call themselves, part of the declaration, but they're not actually, they don't share the same views.
So which opposition would you see is not credible?
The ones that had, for example, the Antalya conference. First of all, most of them were Islamists. You had some of them members of the Muslim Brotherhood, which we all know how much Syria suffered from the Muslim Brotherhood in the late 70s and beginning of 80s, when they chose arms to go against the state and the people of Syria. And the government at that time tried to have dialogue with them. As we have seen from the video which is found on YouTube from Abdullah Azzam, who was the teacher of Osama bin Laden, and he was also the founder of Hamas, who says that the regime tried to, Hafiz Al Assad, the late president of Syria, Allah yarhamu, tried. He went to jail to visit the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood at that time, Marwan Hadid, and he asked him to lay down arms and that they should give up their arms and start dialogue. And at that time, Marwan Hadid told, the late president, we will not give up arms until we have an Islamic state in Syria. And this is completely absurd and unacceptable.
You don't trust the Islamists to be part of this national unity government?
I don't trust them because I told you, there are people, you have Muslim Brotherhood, you have other Islamists who are hiding under moderate Muslims, of course, to get some fundings from, in Europe or the West today. They cannot come and say, oh, we are members of Al-Qaeda or members of the Muslim Brotherhood and would like some funding. So they come and say, we are moderate Muslims. We used to be members of the Muslim Brotherhood, but we're not anymore. But this is when they write in English. For example, a member of the Movement for Justice and Development, one of their members and member of their board, Mr. Ali Al Ahmad, when they write in English, it's very nice. It sounds amazing. Yes, we want democracy, we want religious pluralism, we want everybody to be on board. But when he writes in Arabic on his two websites, one of them is Ali Al Ahmad, I think, .com, and another one is suriyun.net. The articles he writes, in one of them he says, I wish there was a volcano that would come and kill all Alawites, their children and everybody, and their eldest, and that's completely, again, appalling. I mean, in those days to have people like this.
So what proportion of the current opposition uprising you see in Syria is made up of these
No, they're very little. They are actually it's very similar a bit to what happened in Iran, before the Islamic Revolution. They are students. They are people, coming out who want their legitimate rights, who have seen what happened in Tunisia and how the people were able to get their freedom and their democracy. They've seen what happened in other countries like Yemen and Egypt. So these are the people, but the Islamists are trying also to hijack these demonstrations, those peaceful demonstrations, and use violence in some areas because they think that in doing so they'll be able to get to power.
Right, and I mean, from what you said at the beginning, that you're calling for some national unity government, a dialogue to begin between Bashar al-Assad's administration and the opposition. So I take it you see the way forward is some sort of rapprochement between the uprising, between the protesters and the current regime. You're not calling for a different administration or for Bashar al-Assad to go.
It's not calling for him to go. We want changes. We want at the end of the day, we want democracy. We want freedom. We want it to come. We want a peaceful transitional change.
Can that still happen with Bashar al-Assad at the helm?
It could happen. I said yesterday in my interview, you have to be pragmatic and practical. He's there. The guy is there. The regime is there. You have to do the best to pressure them and to get them to sit on a table to have a national unity government, to have national unity dialogue. This is the most important thing. So to hear the voices of the people on the streets.
Well, the voices of the people on the street don't seem to be placated by Bashar al-Assad's recent statements on reform. What's your take on those?
This is very sad and disappointing that until now neither the regime have been listening to what the people want in the streets, and they have used repression against those people, neither those opposition people abroad who are saying again, no, we don't want anything, the regime has to go, we have to put on trial the regime.
What about the opposition in Syria? I mean, they don't seem to be placated either by the vague promises of reform.
Yes, they're not happy with it, but a lot of them are saying if the regime, first, if we want to have a national dialogue, the regime has to stop violence. They have to stop repression, which is normal, and this is what the regime has to do before going into dialogue with anybody. But at least people are ready. They're showing a willingness, unlike and the people from the Antalya conference who refused any kind of of dialogue, or they're just saying we want the regime to go.
So you believe that if the violence from the government side stops, then the people would be more willing to listen to Bashar al-Assad's pledges of reform?
Yes, but he can not only say words. We want actions. The people want actions. They don't want promises anymore. They are tired of hearing promises. So he needs to move right away, as I said, to a national unity dialogue, a national unity government.
In what scenarios would you see Bashar al-Assad leaving power?
I think peaceful transitional change. That's the way forward, and that's the only way forward. Because, as I said, he's there. He has allies. He's not alone. He's not a standalone person. He has people with him. He has Iran with him. He has groups like Hezbollah, like many groups in Iraq, like Sadr militias and other militia, all over who are, supporting him. So it's either we have to choose. It's either we have peaceful transitional change, or either we might find ourselves into a regional war.
And a civil war or a regional war?
A civil war and a regional war. Both, and this is what's the danger about it, because a lot of people today are pushing for a sectarian war, and Iran, of course, is happy about it. If you hear there's a TV channel, for example, who's based in Saudi called Wisal, a television channel. You have daily person sitting on it who's ex-member of the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria, and he's again calling. You have people that come on TV and say we are calling jihad on the Alawites. You also have a Saudi chief. Justice of their council, I think, and he came out again and he said, "I'm calling jihad on the Alawites."
So this is a danger. How likely do you think this could happen? That Syria could descend into some sort of civil war that drags in neighbouring countries?
This is very easy because there are people in the regime who do not want to see any reforms happening in Syria. People in the regime who know very well that any reforms, that would mean that they would have to lose their interest, that they would have to be trialed, they would have to be brought to justice for the atrocities they have committed for the past years. And at the same time, you have people on the other side, like the Islamists, the extremists, who also are pushing for sectarian war without calculating what kind of disaster it could have on Syria and on the whole region.
So this is a very real possibility if a peaceful solution is not found.
It's a very real possibility. In the beginning, protesters were chanting, as I said, we are a peaceful, 111, the Syrian people are one. And nobody has heard what those people were chanting, neither the opposition or the regime. They have to listen carefully to the demands of the people. The people don't want any sectarian violence. They don't want any sectarian war in Syria. So this is, any opposition has to be what the regime is not. If the regime is not listening to the voices of the people, you cannot have an opposition who also chooses to ignore the people of, on the street in Syria.
So should the opposition take seriously Bashar al-Assad's pledges of reform earlier this week?
But they haven't seen, because he's still in the promises stages. He's still promising. People were waiting. 2 months ago, he already came out and made similar promises. For example, he doesn't need to set up any committee or to come and talk to lift, for example, or to abolish the Article 8 of the Constitution, which states that the Ba'ath Party is the leader of state and society. This could be done right away by a presidential decree, to show goodwill, so that the Syrian people start believing that there are things really going on.
So So if they see some concrete action,
exactly, they need to see some concrete action and not just words.
Then there could be some rapprochement with the regime.
Yes.
Okay. Who do you think is calling the shots right now in Syria? Is it Bashar al-Assad or is it Maher, his brother?
It's neither Bashar or Maher. Maher is a military man. This again, we shouldn't confuse between military and secret services. The secret services are the people who are really, the security apparatus, they're the worst. Because, they're the ones who are corrupt, they're the ones who get things out of being in power. Because any member of the secret services could go to any shop or businessman or anybody and tell him, listen, if you don't give me money, I'm going to write a report saying you work with the Islamists or with the Israelis or whatever. You're an Asian, and that's it. You're finished. So that's a very easy way.
Turkey is pushing for Bashar to drop Maher as perhaps like a condition of staying an ally.
Yeah, well, first of all, Turkey should not intervene into Syrian affairs. Turkey and Iran have both same agendas, which are very, Iran wants to have hegemony over the region, and Turkey is the same. One through calling for we are the leaders of the Shias in the Middle East, and the other one is calling for that they are the leaders of the Sunnis and they are the leaders of the Ottoman Empire. And I think the Arabs should be smarter than that. The Arabs and the people in the region should stick together and find a way out. Arabs in all their, groups.
So you don't think Maher is part of the problem in this current situation?
Of course, he's not, because as I told you, he's not like one of the people who are behind the corruption in Syria. He's not getting anything from the corruption in Syria. It's very easy to always blame it on someone. Say, oh, Maher is, or it's in a way trying to even deepen the problem.
Okay, so the corruption is coming from the secret services, the Mukhabarat side.
Yes, and Bashar's, for example, cousins from his mother's side. Rami Makhlouf, he's one of them. He's the most corrupt person in Syria.
So you don't seem to be putting much blame on Bashar himself.
It's not that he's not. Bashar, at the end of the day, we have to know how the facts, how they are on the ground. As I said, we are against this regime. I've suffered a lot from the excesses of the regime, as I told you, but we cannot work on grudges or on, we have to be very transparent. If the regime is lying, if their media is lying, we have to be very transparent, very honest. We cannot, the future of our country cannot be built on grudges and on hatred. It can only be built on reconciliation, on forgiveness, and on working together for a better future of our country. So the people who are around, as I said, you have to look at the things how they are. Bashar inherited the power from his father. He was not elected. How was he able to get there? Because those corrupt people in the regime brought him, because he keeps their interests in their place. So he's there, and those corrupt people don't allow him to make any changes. So as I said, like he had a lot of people around him. For example, General Atif Najib, who was the first one who used violence against the people in Daraa, for example, against the children in Daraa.
So you're saying that basically he's more being manipulated by a corrupt inner circle in the current administration.
He's being manipulated, and in a way, and by a lot of groups. Don't forget also that Iran has a lot of influence inside of Syria, and those people, I mean, are very powerful inside of Syria. So Bashar. But what Bashar has to know is at the end of the day he will be blamed for everything, because he's the head of the government, he's the president of Syria, he's the head of the army, he's the head of the Ba'ath Party. So at the end of the day, all the powers lies in his hands.
What do you think his strategy will be if the uprising continues?
He has what we always called is that Bashar has to come out. If he cannot stand up to those people, if he finds himself that it's very difficult to stand up to those people, he has to come out and say, I've tried my best. I've tried my best. I've been wanting to do reforms since I came to power. But those people, he has to be honest about it. Those people around me have not let me. And it's a danger. Down. There's a risk. I'm not saying there's not a risk. There is a risk about it. Everything. I mean, this job comes with a risk. You're not going to be president of a country like Syria, which has a very difficult geostrategic position in the area, without having risks. And yes, these are parts of the risks.
So if
he has to come out and tell the people that I've tried my best. I need the help of I need you to help me. I can't get rid of those people. I'm stepping down, and I will take the side of the people against those corrupt people. And then by at that time, all the people will stand by his side. And, all the people, the army, everybody against those corrupt people.
So this is what he should do?
This is what he should do.
What do you think he will do?
Well, I'm not in his place, but we've been hoping a lot that this is, to try to avoid bloodshed, to try to avoid any sectarian war, but unfortunately he hasn't done until now, and this is why it looks like I was very optimistic in the beginning, but now I've been very pessimistic about it lately.
Okay. How are your relations at the moment between your side of the family and Bashar's side of the family?
We don't have any relations at all. As I told you, they bombed our house. What kind of relation you're going to have with somebody who bombed your house, who people died? It's horrible, but it's very unfortunate.
So you're completely estranged?
Yes, completely.
I understand you did meet Bashar al-Assad once.
Yes, in '94.
'94.
Yes.
Okay, how was he with you?
Don't want to talk much about it. It was not such a pleasant meeting, but yes, it was the only time that we met.
Oh, okay. You can't say why it was unpleasant?
No, I said I don't want to. It's not something that we talk about enough.
And all right, do you or your father harbour any aspirations to enter the political arena should Bashar al-Assad step down, or if multi-party politics is introduced?
No, not at all. As you know, my father was in Syria, and he left in '84 because my father, he always called, since the 70s, my father always used to call for democracy, and why democracy was very important for a country like Syria with all those minorities. And he had the Al Fursan magazine, and Al Fursan magazine was the only media who would talk about democracy. In every edition, it was a weekly magazine. Why democracy? It's important. And at that time, nobody in the Middle East would talk about democracy.
But at the same time, though, your father was a senior military official in Hafez al-Assad's administration, which was considered to be quite an oppressive regime.
He was the head of the higher education, that's first, and he was responsible for Unit 569. Unit 569's job was to protect Damascus, the capital, because at the time there wasn't any Republican or presidential guards. It was only formed in the late '83, '84. So my father was head of this unit. It was not, it was just, as I said, to protect the capital. As you know, in the late '70s, we had, for example, the problem with the Muslim Brotherhood. Then there was the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in '82. So my father's job, his troops were always to protect the capital. the capital, the presidential palace, all the officials, all the headquarters of the military, all of that.
I mean, the protesters or the opposition or the people calling for democratic change will see, you're of the Al Assad family, you're a member of the Alawite sect, which is seen as, a privileged ruling elite in Syria. And also they all say that, your father did have some sort of military role in the country. Why should the democratic opposition take you seriously? What would you say to them?
It's not that it's not that they should take me or they shouldn't. I'm just a person calling for democracy in Syria, for freedom for our people in Syria, as my father did also, and he has been doing for years, for decades now, as he was the first person to come out. He was the first person, I said, in the Middle East at that time to talk about democracy. He was the first person who had a media outlet who would talk and encourage democracy. My father, and this is what the regime was not pleased with, and this is why they wanted him out of the country, because it was annoying them. He was getting a lot of support. He had the majority of the Ba'ath Party with him. This is why, as you know, the highest Ba'ath regional the Ba'ath command was the National Ba'ath Congress, which was the last that it met. It was in 1980. Why? Because the president, at the time, the late president, found out that all the people in the National Congress were with my father. Again, the Regional Congress, the last time that it met, it was in 1985, because 90% of the members were again with my father. So they decided to stop having any congressional or national meetings.
I mean, when you call for democracy, or when your father calls for democracy, do you still have significant support in Syria, people who will listen to you guys?
Of course, there's a lot of supporters in Syria. Why do you think then
for yourself?
They haven't, they didn't allow him to go back, or they don't want him to go back to Syria? Or why have they haven't allowed him, even when my late uncle passed away, they haven't allowed him to go back to his funeral. My second uncle passed away, Allah yarhamu, my uncle Jamil, again a few years ago, and again they didn't allow him to go to his funeral. So, I mean, if you don't have any supporters, of course they'll tell you come and you could come to the funerals and go back again. But they know the number of supporters, the strength that he has in the military, in the people, as you know. Also, my father had at that time. He had created the Association for Highly Educated People in Syria, which had over 13,000 members in it. And it was, as Patrick Seal says in his book, it was a democratic institution that was competing with the Ba'ath Party. And of course, as soon as he left, they closed it down. So they know very well that he has a lot of supporters in Syria, that he was the only one who, he came out. He could have stayed in power. He was the brother of the president. At the end of the day, he could have stayed and taken advantage of the system, as did many other do, like Khaddam, for example, who just came out a few years in 2005, or when the regime actually told him to leave. But my father came out on his own. He just couldn't take it. He told them this situation cannot go the way it is.
What about other supporters of Bashar al-Assad's administration? I understand he has strong backing from mainly Sunni businessmen right now.
Yes.
Do you see that support ebbing away if the violence continues?
He has the support that he has is a lot of people are not. For example, everybody asks me, why aren't people defecting? Why aren't people this? Because people don't want to see a situation that a dictatorship will replace a dictatorship with a theocracy. They're worried about that. Everybody, when they see a conference like I told you, like at the Antalya conference, they will be, oh my God, we don't want people who are calling for the killing of Alawites or of this or that to come back, because that they know very well what would that lead to. So
some supporters of Bashar al-Assad's regime are genuinely worried about, the overspill, the negative consequences of, a theocracy taking its place. And some others just have vested interests and are worried that their business interests or they are worried that they could be brought to trial themselves.
Yes.
So is it a mixture of these?
It's a mixture of that, of course. It's a mixture of that. When you hear, even if you are against, even if you are against Bashar and you're the same party, but you're like, oh my God, do I want that guy who's calling, on the people to kill Alawites? Do I want, for example, do I accept to have a television channel based in Egypt, for example, like a Safa channel, who every day says Alawites are infidels and we have to kill them? Nobody wants that. As I said, they know what would that lead to. As you know, Syria has a lot of minorities. There are Alawites, there are Christians who are also worried. The Christians, they don't want to find themselves in a situation, for example, like Egypt. You know, that there's nobody to protect them. They have their churches burned down. You know, they don't want that. They don't want to find this like what happens to them also in your country, in Iraq. You know, the Christians were getting killed. So many of them, you know, run out of Iraq, and they're living everywhere else.
So that could be one reason to rally around.
Exactly. All those people who are even they're not happy with the regime, as you said, the Alawites. It seemed to be a privilege. Well, you should go to Syria and go to where the Alawites live, their villages, and go visit how the Alawites live, and they are the poorest areas in Syria. They don't have any privileges. There's a clique at the top, you know, a clique in the regime who is 90% non-Alawites. As you know, you have, for example, ex-Minister of Defense Mustafa Tlas. His son now is part of he's a general in the Presidential Guards. You have Ali Mamlouk, head of secret services, secret apparatus. He's also not an Alawite. You have Farouk Shara, who's vice president. He's not an Alawite. You have the prime minister, who's not an Alawite. You have all ministers, so many generals and so many ministers at the top who are not Alawite. Atif Najib is not an Alawite, who's Bashar's cousin, but he's not an Alawite. You know, many of those people are not Alawite. So we should not point a finger at one sect, you know, or blame one people or one group or one, you know, it's just a clique of people at the top.
Okay. And just finally, I know what your views are on this issue, but I just have to have them on the record for Reuters as well. It's widely believed that your father was heavily involved or maybe orchestrated the Hama massacre. What's your response to calls for him to be tried as a war criminal?
Well, again, we have to have the facts, you know, correct here. My father, I just told you a while ago, my father's units were responsible for the protections of Damascus. So logically, if you ask any military man or any person who knows anything about military, he would tell you if you're responsible for the protection of Damascus and you have an internal threat from the Muslim Brotherhood who were assassinating people every day, you know, in Syria, and you also have the threat of the Israeli invasion to Lebanon, which, as you know, Lebanon is much closer, the borders are much closer to Damascus, to the capital, than Hama. So you're not going to send your troops 200 kilometers outside of the capital while you have 1/4 of the Syrian population live in the capital, you know, and leave the capital and unprotected. It's not logical. While you had so many regiments in Hama. You know, you had the Special Forces, the 3rd Regiment, you know, so many divisions and so many regiments. They didn't need you. They had over 50,000-60,000 troops there.
So your father was not involved?
He was not, and he said he was not. And there was actually a committee, you know, and they should go ask about the committee. I don't know the exact names of the committee. There was a committee that the president appointed to deal with the Hama issue, and there were a few generals, 5 or 6 generals. My father was not even part of that committee.
So where does this come from then, this widely held belief?
Because when they wanted to get rid of my father in 1984, right away after my father left, the president, the late president, appointed General Hamad Khouli, who was head of aerial secret services, and he appointed him to have dialogue, him and General Ali Duba, to have dialogue with the Muslim Brotherhood. So they needed somebody to blame everything on him. You know, it's like they blame corruption on him, they blame this on him. I mean, if you look at Syria, the economy, you could ask any Syrian, how was the economy before my father left Syria, and how did it become after he left Syria? You know, 1 Syrian pound, when my father was in Syria, was equal to 2 French francs. When he left Syria, a few months later, a year later, 1 French francs was equal to 8 Syrian pounds. You know, it's completely changed. I mean, also, how could he be? I mean, what was there? The Rami Makhlouf's father, Bashar's uncle, Mohammed Makhlouf, was head of the Cigarette National Company. He was the only person who could deal with all the oil contracts. So he was the head of the Syrian National Bank.
Are you saying he was framed?
He was framed. They wanted to blame him for everything. This is why when you read today comments on internet and other things, they all say, yeah, where did you get all the, you know? My father, when he left Syria, he didn't have anything. And so his friends in the Middle East, they helped him. In other, like his friends in Saudi and all over the Middle East, they helped him when he left Syria.
And so currently, I mean, would you be able to put a number on the number of people in Syria who support him?
Millions of people support him.
Yeah?
Yeah, millions of people support him.
what feedback, how do you know about this feedback when you guys
get a lot of feedback? I get a lot of, a lot of people call us, they contact us on, Facebook and emails and other things, and they all say, please, we just want to know what does he want, when is he coming back?
And yet your father would not think of going back to Syria if multi-party politics was involved.
Mohammed, you could ask many people in 84, when my father left in 84, he came back in 85 for a few months, because President Mitterrand was a very close friend of him, and he wanted to go visit Syria, but he wouldn't go without my father being there. You should ask how many, there was hundreds and hundreds of thousands, all over Syria. They were celebrating for 3 days, firing shots in the air, of celebrating, as you know, in our country.
Sure.
Nobody could stop them.
Okay, well, given he has this support,
again, when he went back, when he went back, and after they buried his mother in '92, before he arrived, because they didn't want the people to see him and celebrate. He arrived late, but people, again, when they saw him, everybody, including the presidential guards, they carried him, and again, hundreds of thousands of people were chanting and celebrating. This is what infuriated the regime at the time.
We've established he has a lot of support, but why does he not capitalize on that if Bashar al-Assad goes, if there is an opening, or if there's a multi-party political system?
Because my father, what he's looking for, it's, as I told you, he wants democracy. He wants a transitional, peaceful democracy. He doesn't want any infighting. He doesn't want blood, because as you saw, when he left in '84, he could have, the whole army sided with him. The whole Syrian army sided with him. Sure. And you could read that from Patrick Seal's book.
So could he not be a stabilizing factor if he was to go back? He has the army support. He has millions of people's support. Why not to capitalize on that and ensure a more peaceful transition rather than have a vacuum? Your father's a known man.
Yes.
World leaders have known him. The Syrian people have known him. Surely that would bring a sense of stability that you perhaps wouldn't get if unknowns were to enter the fray.
As long as the people will decide, what we're calling is democracy, and in a democracy, people will decide, who they want to. If
the calls increase, then in a democratic way,
yes,
for your father to come back and take some sort of political role, do you think he would consider it?
Honestly, I'm not at his place. You should ask him. But if at the end of the day, as I said, we have to respect what the people want.
And
if the people want that, well, he should. That's his decision to take.
So he would consider it. You think?
I honestly don't know. As I said, it's never had.
You know him best.
Yes, I know him, but until now, as I said, he always says whenever he said, you have to go back to Syria. He said, but I would never accept. I left Syria, and I said he made a speech at the Sheraton Hotel before he left in front of 1,000 people, and he told them, I will not allow one blood, to be spilled in this city that I love. Even though, as I said, the whole army sided with him, and you have people like Patrick Seal, who was pro-regime, he's closer to the regime, who wrote that.
So given that you don't know, he hasn't ruled it out as an option.
Well, he hasn't. He hasn't ruled it out. We never talk about it. It wasn't an option that anybody talked about.
But it's definitely something you've ruled out.
But of course, that it's people. As I said, we know that people, the supporters, have always called. Please come back. Please, we want you to come back. Have always called, on him to come back.
And you wouldn't think of capitalizing on that kind of support that you have for him, that there is for him, for you to perhaps go into Syria and try and make the new Syria that you're hoping for?
As I said, we have to work. The whole Syrian people have to work together.
Sure.
Everybody, have to work together to be able to build the future of Syria. This is what we have to do. But it's not. You don't have to be in a front, have a front role, or to be in politics. To enter politics to be able to do that.
But given this support, you're not ruling out if supporters are a significant...
You could speak to your supporters. This is what I do when I have interviews. When I have this, I'm always, I know that the supporters are listening. I'm trying to get, to get them, send them messages that this is what's important.
So can we say then that while you have not, while you're not declaring any political ambitions,
yes,
you at the same time have not ruled out going into the political arena if that's what Syrians in a democratic system demand, if that's what your supporters ask of you?
I told you I haven't envisaged that. I don't want that, honestly. I don't want that because I love my freedom. I love my freedom too much, and as you know, I've lived abroad since I was 9 years old. And I love this life. I have a baby son. I love to be able to travel with my baby son. I want him to grow. Of course, I want the best for my country. I want myself and my son to be able to go back and live in a democratic Syria. I don't want to be. I don't want him to be. To fear for his life, or for it could be from a dictator regime or from theocratic regime. It's not what I want. A dictator regime, because as you said, they would not allow him to say his whatever is on his mind, and because of being the grandson of his of his grandfather and my son, and again, I don't want him to have to suffer or not be able to go to his country because there's theocratic regime, which they would look at him as being an Alawite and from different side, and an Assad and all this. Okay. And you have to put things also, again, something that I want to say. A lot of people today in the media, the mistake, they always put everybody together. They always say the Alawite regime. They should not do that. This will only help the regime into consolidate its power, because the Alawites are not the ones who are in the regime.
But the current, as you said before, the current Alawite supporters of the regime are more likely to rally around the leadership if they're afraid that they will be targeted in a sectarian way.
As I said, in the beginning, everybody came out together, Christians, Alawites, everybody, because they're all suffering from a dictatorship. Everybody, you cannot, do you honestly believe, you're Iraqi yourself, do you honestly believe there's any person in the Middle East who wants to live under dictatorship?
No.
Everybody wants democracy. Everybody wants to live free. You could be Alawite or not Alawite. You could be the cousin of the president or not. Everybody wants to live free.
But just to confirm, the current.
But because they're afraid, this is what you want to say. Because they're worried, because of what they see happening, because of what those televisions that are inciting on religious violence and sectarian violence, and because of those videos that they've seen in Jisr al-Shughur when those people killed those 120 soldiers, and they were, if you've seen the video, he was saying this man lying on the floor, this dog looks like an Alawite because of his haircut. This is appalling. Of course, those people are going to be, oh my God, Again, there was other people who are Christians, friends of mine, who I know they were against the regime, who've sent me messages on Facebook telling me, there was a demonstration, people were calling Alawites to the coffins and Christians to Beirut, This will consolidate power, and these people, even if they are against the regime, they will be, oh my God, man, all minorities and all, even people who are, from the mainstream, Sunni Muslim, they would be, who are not extremists, because 90% of the Sunni Muslim are not extremists neither, and they don't want to have a theocracy. They're going to be, oh my God, let's stay with this guy. Let's stay with this regime better than having this, those extremists coming back and helped by whoever, Turkey or other countries in the region, who they wouldn't want that.